Are there any matters that we need to take up before we proceed?
No, sir.
All right. Bailiff, if you could bring jurors, please. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back. I believe we're ready to ask if there's further evidence for the defense.
There is. We call Dr. John Blackshear.
Do you solemnly swear the testimony you give this court shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you, sir. Please be seated.
Dr. Blackshear, could you tell the jury your name?
My name is John Henry Blackshear, Jr.
And how do you know Travion Smith?
I was a psychologist who worked as a clinical supervisor at Therapeutic Strategies, where Travion Smith was a client.
Okay, I'll talk with you in a few moments about your work with Travion. I'm just going to get a little bit about your background. Where do you live?
I live in Raleigh.
You live in Raleigh. And where do you work?
I have a private practice in downtown Raleigh, Blackshear and Blackshear Psychological Services. And then I also work at Duke University.
And how long have you been working at Duke University?
15 years.
And what have been your responsibilities at Duke?
I've worked as an ombudsman at Duke University, as a psychologist there, as a clinical director of a center there, and currently I'm an academic dean at Duke.
And what do you do as an academic dean?
My responsibilities are sort of taking care of the academic needs and from matriculation to graduation for undergraduate students in arts and sciences.
And you said you also had a private practice, Blackshear and Blackshear. What sorts of things do you do there?
There, I do anything from individual to couples to family therapy. In addition, I have a few contracts where I do compensation and pension for post-combat veterans. And I also do psychotherapy with veterans, as well as forensic psychology work, where I serve as expert witness in legal proceedings.
And could you tell us about your educational background?
Yeah, I attended Florida A&M University for my bachelor's and my master's degrees in psychology, and graduated from Georgia State University in clinical psychology in 2001. I did a pre-doctoral internship at the Federal Medical Center in Lexington, Kentucky, prior to relocating to Raleigh, where I worked at the women's prison for about a month before transitioning over to Duke.
Now, you talked about the fact that you did work with forensic psychology. Do you sometimes examine people who are charged with crimes who you've never treated beforehand?
Yes, I don't never typically worked in that capacity with people that I've treated, and I've worked in cases from Pennsylvania, New York, Alabama, Georgia, and of course North Carolina.
But this is not what's occurring in this case. You actually did know Travion Smith before he was charged?
Yes.
Okay. And I think you said that you worked with him in something called therapeutic strategies?
Yes.
Can you tell us what therapeutic strategies was?
Therapeutic Strategies was a community-based mental health facility. At that time, I would say about maybe 7 or 8 years ago, a lot of the treatment for indigent, poor, and working class families took place in community-based organizations. When I was first contacted by them, I was really surprised by the level of care that such severe need had, and so I cut off half of my work at Duke, who was gracious enough to allow me to stay on as a part-time employee so that I could actually devote more time to working in the community, which quickly burned out. But I was the only psychologist on staff there. There were maybe 1 or 2 other social workers, but the bulk of the work with clients was done by folks. I think their titles were qualified professionals and PPs. I'm not sure if that stood for paraprofessional or something at that level. So these were people who did not have the level of training that anyone from a master's degree on that probably had, but many of them were people who were earnest about treating especially kids and teenagers who typically aged out of those organizations. But the bulk of the work was done by QPs and PPs who engaged in what I like to call more life skills coaching and life skills training. There were a lot of sort of attempts at behavior management through behavior modification and management through skills development, but there was a paucity of actual clinical intervention.
Were you aware did you work directly with Travion while you were?
I did.
Were you aware if he had mental problems that had been diagnosed at that point?
All right. So, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to ask you to step into the deliberation room for a moment. If you would leave your notebooks, recall all the rules and instructions, and in particular, don't discuss the case among yourselves.
Your Honor, the basis for wanting to be heard is Mr. Waller and I have no documentation from this man unless it's in the school records, which I got less than 48 hours ago, which I've tried my best during breaks to go through. Repeatedly during the course of this trial, we have asked for mitigation information. I don't know if there is. I don't know what he's going to say, but that's kind of the position we're in at this point. I've had to ask each time, and they've provided it. And specifically as it related to mental health experts, we had asked way before the trial. And this is the first time that we've ever, we had the witness list, and obviously I've looked up who he is, but we have no documentation that I am aware of about Dr. Blackshear.
Hold on, Mr. Waller.
Your Honor, and I've been in this case since the beginning, and that's the representation that's always been made to us. We filed a reciprocal discovery request. There's been a lot of allegations about not handing over discovery in this case, and
Towards us.
Towards us, and to now, and we don't know what he's going to say, but to now put this gentleman on the stand and then go the direction it appears we're going, I feel is a violation of discovery rules as well.
Mr. Brown?
Yes, we're not calling Dr. Blackshear as an expert witness. He's not done an evaluation. There are, we've not been able to get the reports that he did from Therapeutic Strategies. We don't have any reports. It appears that they have been destroyed. I believe that is correct.
That's correct. We
With it.
weren't able to reproduce any of that record.
What we are calling him to talk about is that he evaluated about observations from a lay witness perspective, and that he made attempts to find services for him that were unsuccessful in doing that, and that he was not able to do that. We're not asking him to render him about any opinions about him, about his state of mind or anything else, about what he was observing at the time with it and all.
But they clearly know what he's going to say and have had that conversation and not produced anything to us about it.
Well, I believe that we're required to do that for expert witnesses, and we're taking a decision that we've talked about beforehand about not calling people for the purposes of being an expert witnesses with it and all. And so that's the purposes with that.
But surely mitigation does not mean that we are blindsided, Judge.
Is this witness going to discuss any diagnosis or any,
I was not going to go into any particular diagnosis. I was going to ask if he had observations of him about whether he was a follower or a leader. I was going to ask did he make efforts to go ahead and try to get him services that he was not able to get him services that he felt was needed at that time. So I'm doing it from his perspective of trying to get things with that. That's what I was going to have him do.
all right, how is the follower versus leader not, how is that not an expert opinion? I mean, is it not based on his education, experience, training?
I'm having him testify to it as we're going to have other people testify to it who are lay witnesses.
Has he had an opportunity to observe Mr. Smith in a situation where he was either a follower or a leader, or is this a diagnosis?
I'm not, I can do you want me to do would it be good for me to do a voir dire about this, about that aspect about it? I think my anticipation is that from his observations of him, I'm not going to ask him in terms of a clinical diagnosis about it with it.
All right, well, I'll allow voir dire to see what,
And,
yes.
Your Honor, I just want to add one other thing in terms of the concept of the state being blindsided. They did get a long, detailed log of these. So Mr. Smith had his first inpatient hospitalization at 5, and we provided a log of all the places where he received treatment during that whole period of time. At the same time, back in 2014, when we turned over the report from Anne Marie Evans. So I just want the court to be aware that the magnitude of the fact that there is a mental health history that we chose not to put on at this case is not something that either side was unaware of moving forward.
And that may be one issue. Someone who is aware of the history of treatment may be able to testify to that without being an expert, obviously, and so that may be one thing, but I am concerned about incorporating into that a expert opinion as to any diagnosis when the witness has not been tendered as an expert. And so why don't we go through a voir dire just to see exactly what direction you intend to go with this witness, and then I'll try to make some rulings based on that.
All right. During your time with Mr. Smith, you got to observe him?
Yes.
And did you get to observe him with other people?
Yes, I had.
And from your personal observations, did he appear and I'm talking to you, did he appear to be someone who was acted as a follower or as a leader?
So at the time that I had Travion, he was really young. So, and, you know, one of my concerns was that he was highly impressionable and highly influenced. And so from that time period, that observation, he was definitely not in a position of leadership, and I had never seen him sort of being able to corral others around him. He was more than anything else kind of a you know, highly impressionable, easy to influence kid. I mean, I remember a joke going around that, you know, someone said it was snowing and it was July, and he ran to the window to look out. I mean, but that's, yeah.
About how old was, I should have asked, do you remember about how old Travion was when you were treating him?
I want to say around 12, maybe 13.
Did you make efforts to try to get him services?
Yes, I thought that he needed a very high level of intervention. My biggest concern for him was that I felt, if I was to draw an analogy, that we were basically treating, you know, cancer with an aspirin. And I thought that, and I had suggested his father to sell everything, live in a tent next to a residential facility if you have to, get him somewhere where he'd get the level of treatment he needed.
Why don't we talk about what services, what sorts of programs did you try to get him into?
Well, we made recommendations for, I'm blanking on the names, but there was one in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, where it was a residential treatment program and a school for boys. But I mean, most desperately, it would have been we just wanted the okay to make those recommendations, and his father indicated that they couldn't afford to take the next step of basically long-term mental health hospitalization for him.
Okay. So you were trying to get him into long-term mental health facilitations, and his father said he could not go ahead and afford that.
Couldn't do it, yeah.
Okay. And as far as you know, did any of the treatment programs that you ever recommended, would they ever follow through with?
No, not that I know. I know that he went into day treatment. And again, day treatment, I think, is really good for in-school behavior problems that give students a place to be that is a smaller, less stimulating environment, so that they are, so that those life skills and behavioral modification programs can be put into place, but not for somebody with the level of illness and problems that I observe with Trey.
Right. Thank you. That would be our proffer. And some of it, I will say that we could probably agree about having Dr. Blackshear talking about it, even limiting what is said now, talking about he did have observations of him, and that with other kids and all, and observed him as being a follower and a leader, and that he tried to get him into long types of programs and all, but the family did not have enough money to be able to afford it, and did not get the programs that he was trying to recommend with him on it. And I don't think that is, I think that's something he can testify to. I mean, he's obviously someone who would be qualified to be an expert, but we have not proffered him as such.
I would, as to the follower or leader, I didn't hear a great deal of foundation for that observation. So I think the question was, have you had an opportunity to observe the defendant with other people, and did you form the impression that he was a follower or a leader? I'd like a little bit more understanding about what exactly those observations consisted of.
All right. Dr. Blackshear, when you were working with him with therapeutic strategies, did you have a chance to see him with other kids?
Yeah, therapeutic strategies. We were able to, I mean, there were other kids around. There were also sort of group outings and things like that that kids would participate in.
So you got to, in that chance, so you got to watch him with other kids. And from what you saw with him, were you able to form an opinion about it, an impression about whether he was more of a follower or more of a leader?
From what I observed, yes. Even for where kids were at the early adolescent stage of thinking and engaging and things like that, I mean, he was like a kid. He was like a younger kid in relation to those kids. And I mean, one of the things that I impressed upon his father was just that, he is not the kid who's going to be, capable of, I think, standing up to the type of influence and pressure that
Was that
may come
based-
from. That was based on observation. I mean, and also, what he and his father would report when they come back in, because I would always do kind of a check in to see how the previous week went, and then again it was Travion making poor decisions, in relation to influence that others have sort of put before him, and he went along with. So.
And that was from personal,
And that was, but that was also the reason why I suggested a total relocation for the family, because I thought that the only way you're going to affect this kid and give him a chance was total relocation from the community where he was, that was highly impressioning. It impressed his behavior quite a bit. So. But that was really, really one of the strongest factors for me, being absolutely firm and angry that didn't take place.
All right. State wish to be heard.
Yes, Your Honor, if I can approach, I'm going to mark this as S1. When Ms. D said she gave us an extensive log of his mental health treatment, that's what we received early on and before I was involved in the case. And what this sounds like, Judge, is trying to backdoor an expert opinion. This man is very well qualified, clearly, to be an expert. He has talked about how overly qualified he was versus everyone else there, and he took it upon himself. And I would submit trying to get this evidence in without giving us proper notice is improper, it's unfair, and it's prejudicial to the state. Separate and apart from the fact that it sounds like all of these recollections are just from his memory and not documented, and I know I'm not calling fault to either place. Apparently they've been destroyed, and unfortunately we don't have them. But it sounds to me that they're trying to backdoor an expert opinion in on this about, the only chance this child had was total relocation for the family. The jury can do nothing but take that as an expert opinion after he's talked about how he even in his own statement about what his background is, I've been an expert witness. When he was talking about going to college, and he clearly has this qualifications to be an expert, but that was out of his own mouth, and I don't know how you can tell the jury not to listen to this man as an expert or not consider his testimony as expert testimony.
And it appears, Your Honor, that all of his observations are in a clinical setting. This isn't his brother saying that I've seen Travion playing with other kids. This is a man who has made these observations and this opinion, as Mr. Brown said, an opinion as to him being a follower or a leader in a clinical setting. He's already laid the foundation for this guy, for Dr. Blackshear being an expert in front of this jury.
And not calling him that is...
He's already rang the bell.
Only one time on the objection, please. All right. Of course, the rules of evidence are a guide in this portion of the proceedings. They're not controlling. The rules of discovery certainly apply. What, out of fairness to the state and in giving due deference to the defense, I'm going to allow some of his testimony. The areas that I would not allow is his opinion that Mr. Smith was not capable of standing up to the pressure of other kids and that he relayed that to his father. I think that's a medical diagnosis, but I will allow his observation of Mr. Smith at age 12 or 13 with other children, and he appeared to be impressionable and a follower. But without adding, that in my view would be a lay opinion that does not take a great deal of training and experience. Gullibility, following, those sorts of things I think are a lay opinion. But I caution the witness and caution counsel that this is not a medical or psychiatric opinion. This is simply someone who observed a 12 or 13-year-old interacting with other children and formed that opinion. Likewise, I think the language that he made poor decisions with respect to following others, again, is more in the context of a psychiatric opinion. So the observations can be made, and the lay opinion that he was a follower or impressionable or gullible are permitted. Now, with respect to efforts to get services, a statement like treating cancer with an aspirin would not be allowed. I think that gives a diagnosis, or at least gives an opinion as to the magnitude of a mental health condition. However, the fact that based on his interaction with Mr. Smith, that he recommended to the family, not that they sell everything to get him the level of treatment he needed, I think again that strays into the area of diagnosis about the severity, but the fact that he recommended long-term mental health treatment, and the fact that his father said that he couldn't afford it, and the fact that based on his knowledge, Mr. Smith never received that long-term mental health treatment, and the fact that he was aware of day treatment that was received is all appropriate. I also think that he can, without being an expert, describe in his mind what the difference between, in a general sense, what the difference between long-term treatment and day treatment is, but not as it applies specifically to Mr. Smith, not saying in long-term treatment Mr. Smith would have received this, but simply in general terms that day treatment is appropriate for children who XYZ, and long-term treatment is appropriate for people ABC.
Okay, I think that makes sense. Dr. Blackshear, does that make sense?
I just want to be very careful that there's not a medical or psychiatric opinion given that is based on your expert knowledge that specifically relates to Mr. Smith, because I believe that would be unfair to the state without having proper notice and the opportunity to prepare.
So, and just to make sure that I'm in accordance with the court's ruling, it would be my intention to ask that you had a chance to observe him with other children, and did you observe him from your personal observations? Did he appear to be more of sort of a follower or a leader?
And there need to be foundation, just like,
Yeah, about seeing the chance in there, observing him with other children and all. Does that make sense with that?
Mm-hmm.
And then that afterwards, in doing it, Did you make recommendations? Is there differences between long-term treatment and short-term treatment? Did you make recommendations for him to get long-term treatment? Were those treatments, as far as you know, was he ever placed in that? As far as you know, was he placed in, what is the difference between long-term treatment and
Right.
short-term treatment?
And whatever conversations he had with the family in terms of their ability to afford, all those
Ability
things
to
are fine. Without going into the notion of Mr. Smith needs long-term treatment for the following reasons, but simply the
fact that he
the
got it.
fact that it was recommended and the fact that the family reported back we can't afford it or whatever the response was, those conversations would be admissible as well.
Okay.
And just because I wasn't clear, and so I don't know if Dr. Blackshear was clear, but that his observations would include the anecdote about his gullibility.
I think that's if that's an opinion that he heard expressed by other children or other people, I think that's that would be admissible in the context of this hearing. Yes, sir.
Your Honor, I'd ask that he be restricted from saying that he saw this behavior in a clinical setting as to kind of Mr. Brown's very last question, which we objected, in a mental health type situation. I think that's appropriate. He can say he saw him with other kids, fine. But I think the minute he starts talking about, I saw him in a situation in which I evaluate mental health, it's going exactly towards the expert issue.
I'm going to allow, these observations, Doctor, were made at, I'm sorry, I don't remember the name of
Therapeutic strategies.
Therapeutic strategies, and I gather that's some sort of, that you have group sessions as well as individual.
Yeah, there were times.
So they go on outings. I think it's only reasonable that the jury understand where these outings were, that they were observations, but again, yes, sir.
Yeah, and the only one other thing that I would add, which I don't think is all clinical, it's his observations that the family was poor and could not afford services, which I think you said already.
That would be
Okay.
admissible. That, I think, falls in the category of a lay opinion.
All right.
All right. Any questions either from the witness? Everybody understand the ruling?
I believe so.
All right. Let's bring jurors in then. For this, but Ms. Harrell informed me that one of the jurors expressed a concern that a parking lot attendant asked the juror how long the trial was going to go, and the juror felt uncomfortable with that because she had been instructed not to, he or she, had been instructed not to discuss the case. She reported that to Ms. Harrell. Ms. Harrell reported it to me and is going to caution the ticket attendant, have the county caution the ticket attendant. Anything further we need to do on that issue?
No, enough. I meant to mention it this morning, so thank you.
All right, thank you. Gentlemen, thank you for your patience. Again, don't speculate or concern yourself about what occurs outside your presence. They are issues of law that are required to be conducted outside the presence of the jury. I'm going to further questions from the defense.
Dr. Blackshear, do you remember about what age Travion was when you knew him?
Yeah, it was around 12 or 13.
Okay. And when you knew him when you were at Therapeutic Strategies, did you have a chance to see him with other children about that age?
I did. With the children who were being treated there were sometimes group outings where kids would go to the mall or go to different activities like play bowling or play basketball or different things like that.
From what you saw of him in during those times, and when he was being with other children, did he seem like someone who was more like a leader or a follower?
watching him, he was definitely not sort of the leader of ring. If you could, looking at a bunch of early pubescent kids playing together, he actually seemed much younger than the others and more impressionable than probably the most impressionable of the group. But he wasn't the one who I would say would step out and be the kid who's going to pick the teams or the kid, nothing like that.
Did you ever hear anybody talk about a story that showed that they thought that the other kids thought he was gullible?
Oh yeah, the kids would laugh at the fact that they had told him that it was snowing outside one day, and he ran to the window to go see, and it was July.
As part of your role, did you recommend that he get long-term treatment?
I did. I knew that that he would have to. My recommendation was that he would get, significant residential long-term treatment, and I know that he actually received what's called day treatment, and that is on a long-going basis. But day treatment is really, I think, best for children who had behavioral problems, that life skills coaching and interpersonal skills development would work, and these kids don't do very well in the typical school setting. That was not what I had suggested for Travion. I thought that what he needed was much more inpatient psychological and
Sustained.
Could you
Sustained.
could you just tell us, in general, not talking about Mr. Smith, what sorts of things long-term treatment is for?
Long-term treatment is for people who have really severe psychological.
Overruled.
Who have severe psychological issues that need, a depth of intervention that, and also it just requires a person to be sort of in an environment that's safe, and that's where you're dealing with things like neurological, developmental. Okay.
Sustained at this stage.
And did you talk with his father about the need for long-term?
I did.
And was this something he was able to afford?
The reason why his father said he wasn't able to get him into long-term treatment was because he couldn't afford it financially, and the way that his life was structured, he wouldn't be able to, make the adjustments there that something like that would have required.
All right. Thank you. No further questions.
Cross-examination.
Dr. Blackshear, you said it was about 12 to 13 was the age that Travion was.
Yeah, but
Where was he in school?
I think in Garner Middle, maybe. I can't quite recall.
And that's my question. Were you aware that he was when he was in school in Aversboro, that would have been in 2002 to 2004, which would have put him at about 10 to 11.
Okay. Yeah.
So was it more like 10 to 11 or 12 to 13?
I saw him, it would have been after that. It would have been around 2006, 2007.
And at that point, he would have been in Longview?
Longview may have been, yeah, I was not quite, I couldn't remember which school. I don't have the records.
Right. And that's the next question. You don't have records because they've been destroyed or something.
Yeah,
Nothing that you did.
The agencies own the records, and best of my knowledge, they've been destroyed, which is wildly unfortunate.
And what kind of interaction do you at Therapeutic Strategies have with the schools in terms of trying to figure out what the school is doing to meet the needs of particular students or clients, whatever you
Yeah, mostly that was a transaction that took place between the qualified professionals and the PPs and the schools, so they would be the ones that did a lot of the engagement with the schools, that were the ones who took the treatment plans, to the schools to sort of let them know what the goal of the treatment was. And so me personally, John, I didn't have any engagement with the school.
And so, but to be clear, it's important for you or for anyone that's in any sort of life skills coaching or anything with an adolescent child to know what's going on at school, I would assume.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And how many times would you say you had the opportunity to meet with the defendant?
I would put it at less than a dozen, okay, for sure.
And how many of those would have been in group settings of the dozen?
And I wasn't the one primarily responsible for running group settings, so I would have been I always like to go and just be there as a part of that. And I would guess probably no more than 4 or 5 times.
Okay. And so you were primarily focused on being one-on-one with the kids, but when they would go together, you wanted to be involved in that. Yeah. Is that what you're saying? Mm-hmm. And your testimony is that he wouldn't be the one to sort of be the ringleader. Is that your testimony?
That was my recollection, yeah.
And that you found him to be gullible, I think was the word that you said.
Yeah.
Were you aware that Travion had do you know what an IEP is?
I do.
Okay. Can you tell the jury what that is?
It's an individualized education plan, one that's put together for, most of the time, for people who have learning disabilities and learning disorders, diagnosed learning disorders, or they can be also put together for people who have behavioral and emotional issues.
And the school is the one who puts an IEP in place to try and focus on a particular student, individualized sort of in the name,
yeah,
to make sure that the student's needs are being best met. Isn't that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
And is it your understanding that they have to be reviewed annually?
They typically are, yeah.
And that would have been...
Well, I would say maybe, so in most contexts, an IEP can stand for a period of time. So if a student's going into college, what was decided can last for 5 years now. But I think at that time it was at least every 3 years they had to be reevaluated, but those IEPs are typically reviewed each year by the new teacher and the staff there to determine how in this new classroom these outcomes are going to be met.
And how to best meet the students' need and the
absolutely.
class's needs. And you said that you were familiar with them. Did you have an opportunity to review the IEP that was put in place for Mr. Smith when he was in grade 6 at Longview?
I don't recall if I saw that, back in 2006, 2007, but I have not seen that recently.
Okay. And it's safe to say that you haven't seen the defendant in 10 or 11 years.
About that, yeah.
May I approach the witness, sir?
Yes.
I'm going to show you what I've marked as S2.
Sure.
Which, I don't know, are you familiar with the layout of the IEPs?
Sure.
Does this look familiar to you?
Yeah.
At least, okay. And again, the professionals in that particular classroom that says Longview grade 6 with you so far.
Yeah.
I want to draw your attention to the present level of educational performance and have you read along with me. Travion can be a very respectful, engaging, and helpful student. He does have the ability to ignore distractions and work hard to complete assignments. However, when given an academic or behavioral instruction, Travion can be argumentative and belligerent, and then they have in parentheses, cursing, yelling, talking back, and disparaging comments with staff. The next paragraph, or next sentence, when interacting with peers, Travion will display aggressive behaviors, and then they again describe that teasing, taunting, verbal threats of physical harm and physical contact. Was that something that you had seen prior to your interaction with him as documented by 6th grade teachers? Had you seen this document? Sorry.
I don't recall seeing that document, no.
And then again, it would be evaluated at a later date, at least generally speaking, you want to make sure that they're doing well or
Yeah, absolutely.
into the next classroom. And so May I reapproach, Judge?
Yes, ma'am.
That's 3 for the 7th grade one. Now at Longview, does that look like Longview 7th grade?
Yeah.
And again, taking it to this present level of educational performance, Travion is currently a 7th grader attending Longview. He has teacher-pleasing behavior, can participate in classroom activities appropriately most times. However, Travion has a problem of remaining focused. He is distracted by the slightest distraction. He's usually wasting time doing things other than what's instructed. Travion chooses to sleep rather than complete most classwork. Is that something that you had ever seen or been made aware of prior or during your interaction with the defendant?
I don't recall seeing that one either.
And when you said that your understanding of Mr. Clark, the defendant's father, was that his motivation or his lack of motivation for following your recommendations was because they couldn't afford the treatment plans that you had put in place, did you direct them towards Medicaid or any sort of funding sources that he could use?
He was already receiving those, to my understanding, in IRPS, which was another funding resource by the state.
And Medicaid, in many circumstances, will cover mental health treatment if recommended by a professional. Is that correct?
Yeah, if recommended, but I mean, we were talking about something that was going to be long-term, and so there was a lot of justification that would have to be made for those sort of things. But even that, we did know that the likelihood that Medicaid would have approved something like that, it just wasn't great for us at the time, and that's why, you know, the next best thing would have been residential. Would have been day treatment.
But it's not unheard of, and certainly it happens, that Medicaid covers the cost of residential treatment.
If we were probably able to prove something organic, I think so. I know he was treated with psychotropic medication at the time, but I can't recall what it was. And so there is an attempt to ratchet it up, but sending a client through sort of the stages of the most cost-effective means before engaging in something as expensive as residential.
Yeah, but my question is, it's not unheard of that Medicaid would cover the cost.
It's not unheard of.
I don't have any further questions.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. Ron.
It's not unheard of, but can it be pretty difficult?
It's not unheard of, but it's not likely. I guess is what I was trying to convey. Is just that I've never been able to recommend a client for long-term residential treatment, and they get it through Medicaid. Right? And I've seen, you know, a lot of clients in Medicaid. I've been able to recommend them for things like day treatment, things like sort of the group homes. And again, you're talking about a level of treatment that's not commensurate with being out in Butner at a facility. So.
Ms. Shakita showed you reports that talked about Travion being easily distracted. Was that something that surprised you to see those reports?
No.
All right. Thank you. I have no further questions.
Mr. Keenan. All right, thank you, sir. You may step down.
Thank you.
Yes, Your Honor. If I just may have 1 second.
Yes, sir.
Your Honor, may I have a 5-minute break?
All right, so ladies and gentlemen, we'll be in recess until 10:30. Please recall all the rules and instructions I've given you. Don't talk about the case among yourselves or with anyone else. Don't form or express opinions about the outcome. No media or independent investigation of these matters. No conversations with parties, witnesses, or lawyers. We'll gather at, let's go ahead and just say 25 minutes till 11, so that'll be about 12 minutes from now.
I'm sorry, Your Honor, we had an issue with our next witness being uncomfortable talking in front of another person in the audience, but I think we have that resolved.
All right,
Okay,
so
thanks.
we'll just take a recess now, and then when we return, we'll just move forward. So we'll be in recess until 25 minutes till.
Superior Court stands in recess till 10:35.